Hey guys, tonight we're diving under a sky so ancient it hums one that once whispered secrets to kings, priests, and scribes deep in the heart of the Maya world. But among all the precision, the glyphs, the sacred alignments, there's one strange absence that nags at you. Picture this: a comet tears across the heavens like a screaming candle in reverse, bright tail, vanishing head, and nobody flinches. No panic, no prophecy, not even a frown. It's like the sky just burped and everyone politely ignored it. You're about to find out why. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I always love seeing who's awake with me in the quiet. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drag your sandals across damp, beaten earth, the jungle just waking behind you, birds coughing out confused sounds like they've all read different scripts. A pyramid rises ahead, still dark in the early light, its wide stone face streaked with moss and old blood. To your left, a boy picks nervously at a clay pot of coals. Everyone is looking up, but it's not dawn they're waiting for. A comet blazes silently overhead, long silver, like the finger of a god too shy to touch the ground. Its tail stretches like spilled honey across the sky. You gape at it, completely transfixed. You're expecting a gasp, a scream, someone to yell something dramatic like the gods are fighting, but nothing. One of the priests scratches his elbow. Someone coughs. A woman pulls a child gently back into her hut, as if shielding her from a draft, not a celestial fireball. You glance around again. These people know their stars. They've carved them into stone, danced under eclipses, and whispered secrets to Venus like it owed them rent. But this, they're acting like it's just cloud with commitment issues. You walk forward, puzzled, craning your neck as the comet fades. A guard nods at you in passing calm as morning soup, and you wonder if maybe you're the weird one. Maybe where you're from, comets mean chaos. But here, it's like someone pressed mute on cosmic drama. You make your way to the observatory near the center of the city. It's a half-ruined stone dome, perched on the top level of a stepped platform. Vines curl around its corners like it's shy to be seen. You duck under a low archway and find yourself in a circular chamber filled with stone seats, each carved to face a different celestial direction. A priest stands at the far end, his robe a patchwork of feathers and paint. He's mumbling about the sun's upcoming position, not even glancing at the sky's most exciting event in weeks. You clear your throat. Did you see it? See what he replies, not looking up. The comet. He finally turns to you, eyes calm and ancient. That is not for the calendar. It comes when it wants and leaves before it's asked. You blink. But isn't that the point of astronomy, to track what the sky does? The priest chuckles softly, like someone patting a dog who just fetched a sock instead of a stick. The sky is a teacher, but not everything it says is useful. You step out again into the cool dawn air, heart pounding slightly. Something doesn't add up. These people could predict eclipses centuries in advance. They knew when Venus would vanish and reappear. Their calendars could make modern Excel users weep with envy. And yet, this glittering celestial tantrum gets no mention. You shuffle through the morning fog, following a line of children carrying offerings of tamales and feathers to a nearby altar. One of them points upward and says something that sounds like sky serpent, but is quickly hushed by a woman who glances nervously toward the temple. It hits you then. It's not that they didn't see the comet, it's that they chose not to. The rest of the day moves slowly, as if the air is made of syrup. You help carry wood to the fire pit, your muscles aching in unfamiliar ways, trying not to drop the bundles. The priests prepare for the equinox ceremony, marking the sun's perfect rise between twin pillars. Everyone's excited, murmuring about angle shadows time. Not one person mentions the comet. You ask an older man sweeping the temple stairs, "Why doesn't anyone talk about the thing in the sky last night?" He spits into the dust and shrugs. "It doesn't belong here. Sky ghosts come when rules are broken." "What kind of rules?" He leans closer, whispering, "The kind not written. The kind the gods don't like you measuring." You laugh nervously, thinking he's joking, but his face doesn't even twitch. Later, as dusk creeps back in like a shy guest, you sit with a group of apprentices watching the stars blink on one by one. They argue over lunar cycles, one of them drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick, correcting another's angle with comic outrage. You point at the sky. Think it'll come back tonight. They follow your finger, and one of them pales. Don't say that. Why? The gods might hear. It's suddenly very quiet. Even the frogs seem to have opinions on what's appropriate to discuss. You lie back on the stone, letting the coolness soak into your spine. Overhead, the Milky Way stretches like a trail of breadcrumbs for lost souls. And somewhere in that vastness, the comet fades quietly, unmarked, unwelcome, and unread. Tomorrow the priests will plot the moon's arc. Farmers will plant according to the stars. The temple singers will chant Venus prayers. But no one, not one single person, will say a word about the sky that caught fire and passed like a ghost. And you'll keep wondering why. But you're not done wondering yet, because in the coming days, as you spend more time with star watchers, scribes, and wide-eyed apprentices with ink-stained fingers, you'll realize this omission is no accident. It's a decision, a silence wrapped in ritual. And maybe, just maybe, that silence hides something bigger than you imagined. The next morning, the air is syrup thick with humidity and wood smoke. You wake to the sound of a conch shell, low and warbly like a seasick elephant trying its best. Around you, the city stirs, stone against sandal children laughing with that eerie, early morning energy you've never understood. You stretch bones popping like old corn and begin your slow walk toward the ceremonial platform just east of the city. They call it an e-group. No, not like your cousin's email newsletter about crypto. This one's older. Stone platforms aligned so precisely with the sun's seasonal risings, they make modern architects look like they're just stacking boxes. You climb up with a bundle of plant offerings, partly out of respect, partly because you've learned not to refuse anything handed to you by a grinning woman holding a machete. At the top, priests are arranging incense burners in a symmetrical pattern. One of them nods toward the horizon. Today, the sun will rise exactly between those two pillars. If it does not, someone's math is wrong. And we cannot have that. You smile because it's a joke, but also not. The Maya took celestial math seriously. Like, if you get this wrong, the rainy season might arrive late and our corn dies, and we starve levels of Sirius. You sit beside a young apprentice named Yax, a name that sounds like someone sneezing politely, and he shows you his notes. Bark paper covered in glyphs that look like they're halfway between cartoons and spreadsheets. This tells us when to plant, he says, tapping a small snail-like symbol. And this tells us when to prepare for eclipses. Another tap, another glyph. This one looks like a grumpy frog holding a staff. But no comets, you ask, knowing the answer. He looks away. They don't obey, he mutters. Why would we invite them into the calendar? That phrase hits you like cold water. They don't obey. You glance around at the platform, an open-air observatory older than some empires, and realize it's designed for predictability, for worshiping the order of the sky, not its wild cards. The sun rises perfectly, gloriously between the stone pillars. The crowd cheers. Incense wafts in spirals that climb the air like invisible snakes. Someone offers you a cup of thick, chocolatey drink so bitter your tongue tries to escape your mouth. You drink it anyway because you're polite and also slightly terrified. Later, you help clean the soot off the ceremonial steps. It's tedious, soot-stained work, and your hands smell like burnt honey and sweat. But from here, you can see the whole plaza. The symmetry is everywhere. Buildings aligned with star statues, facing cardinal points, shadows that fall like clock hands. Yax joins you again, crouching beside a stone turtle. My teacher says the gods live in the patterns, that they move through math. You raise an eyebrow. So anything that's not in the pattern is a mistake, he finishes. That word lingers, mistake. You picture the comet again, how it sliced across the sky like it owned the place. Unscheduled, uninvited, absolutely fabulous, but a diva. And now you start seeing it in everything, the way people avoid looking west at night, where the last comet appeared. The way no child draws stars with tails. The way everyone recites moon phases but flinches when lightning forks down near the horizon. You try bringing it up again that evening around a fire pit where apprentices roast maize and argue about whether the moon smells like bone or jade. You ask, but what if comets do have patterns? Yax drops his stick. Another girl frowns. That's dangerous. You laugh. What asking questions? No, she whispers, measuring chaos. That night, you dream of skies filled with symbols, planets as beads on a string, stars, humming songs only the priests can hear. But the comets, they float just outside the dream watching. You wake up before dawn again, the humid air clinging to your face like regret. Another trek this time to a different part of the city, an older observatory mostly abandoned. A grizzled priest named Kin comes to meet you. Bones wrapped in robes, dyed with crushed flowers and history. He walks with a limp and talks like a winded hawk, sharp but slow. You want to know about the comet, he says, not a question. You nod. Ignore it. That's what I don't understand. He leans against a cracked pillar, eyes flicking skyward. It does not belong. We measure what repeats, what sings the same song every time. The sun, the moon, Venus, that jealous star, and the comet. He smiles, not kindly. The comet screams. For a moment, neither of you speaks. Then he gestures to a stone carving half covered in vines. You help clear it. It's a map of the stars, Venus-Mars constellations arranged like ancient theater seating. But one part has been chipped away, vandalized, no erased. Was that a comet, you ask? He nods. A foolish scribe tried to add it once, thought it might have a rhythm, and when the next war began, they blamed him. But it was just a rock in space. He shrugs. So is your skull. You're starting to get it now, not just the superstition, but the philosophy. Comets don't fit the system. They don't return on cue, don't behave like Venus, don't care about your solstice plans. And to a society that built entire cities around celestial timing, that's terrifying. You leave the observatory feeling like you've peeked behind the curtain and found a guard checking their notes in panic. Back in the main plaza, music rises for an evening ceremony. Drums flutes the chant of something ancient and slightly off-key. You sit at the edge watching dancers move in spirals like planets, chasing each other's tails. Overhead, the stars blink on slow and steady, predictable, measured. But just above the western ridge, there's a faint glow, a tail, a smear of light you've come to recognize instantly. You glance at the crowd. No one looks up. The dancers keep spinning. The priests keep chanting. Yax hands you a drink and smiles, and you say nothing, because now you understand the unspoken rule. Some lights in the sky aren't meant to be followed. You're beginning to notice things others pretend not to, like how every building seems to be eavesdropping on the sun, or how the priests carve obsidian mirrors that reflect only what they want the sky to say. The next morning, your curiosity drags you toward the southern temple, the one locals say holds the old masks, which is never comforting, by the way. You arrive just as the first heat of the day thickens into a soup. Inside, the chamber smells like damp stone, dried flowers, and secrets that haven't bathed in centuries. A thin boy named Zek leads you through a side hallway. He says he's an apprentice, though his voice cracks like someone allergic to authority. "We're not really allowed here," he mutters, "but the master's in meditation." And you've got a good face. You decide to take that as a compliment. The hallway opens into a domed chamber lit by a single shaft of sunlight slicing through smoke from slow-burning incense. At the center sits the star priest. He doesn't turn when you enter. His back is straight still as a statue, cloaked in pale green feathers that shimmer like damp leaves. His face, when he finally looks your way, is hidden behind a jade mask carved into the shape of a skull. A human skull with thin etchings along the cheekbones that resemble constellations. You try not to stare. Failing, come he says. His voice is dry thunder. You seek what should not be spoken. I want to understand why comets are ignored. He gestures for you to sit, so you do, knees popping like popcorn. Zek kneels beside you, pulling out a roll of bark paper and a collection of jade figurines. Each one is carved with obsessive precision, sun, moon, planets, even Venus with her smug little face. But no comets. These, the priest begins tapping each figure one by one, are the keepers of time. They follow the dance. When the moon wanes, it promises return. When Venus dies, it promises rebirth. These bodies are faithful. And comets, you ask. He pauses. You feel the temperature drop. No joke, the air itself shivers like someone just stepped over your grave. Comets are not dancers, he says. They are messengers, but not of time, of breaks in time. That phrase, it hits harder than the last tortilla at dinner. Breaks in time like cosmic glitches, little sky tantrums no one invited. But don't they follow orbits too, you ask, hoping not to be turned into a toad for insolence? He leans in. Yes, but their paths are long. too long for us to plot, too long for our calendar wheels. When they return, generations are gone. Whole cities may crumble. How do you track a message meant for your great-great-grandchild's enemy? That's a fair point. Zek places a new figurine on the mat. It's a blob of stone carved into a vaguely cometish shaped tail, sweeping backward, a mouth carved open in silent scream. It's not part of the official set. You can tell immediately. No one touches it. Even Zek recoils slightly after placing it. We call it Kuyukul Kij, says the priest. The screaming light, it arrives when boundaries fail. When gods blink, you nod slowly, heart pacing like a tap dancer on a sugar high. But if it brings messages, you say, shouldn't we listen? The priest places his hand flat on the floor. And what if the message is everything you believe is wrong? A heavy silence follows. Even the air tastes cautious. Once he continues, a city tried to study the comets. They believed even the chaos had a pattern. They marked them, mapped them, built a temple facing their path. You lean in. What happened? He shrugs. No one remembers the city's name. Charming. You rise to leave brains swirling with questions and the faint scent of panic. Zek follows you out, eyes darting like a squirrel that's seen too much. Do you believe him, you ask? He hesitates. I think he's scared. That's the thing that sticks with you. The man who wears a skull mask and talks to stars for a living, he's scared. That evening, you return to the public observatory where you first saw the comet. No one's there now, too early for ceremony, too late for casual stargazing. You sit on the smooth ledge and look up. A few clouds drift like lazy sheep across the sky. Stars blink in one by one, unbothered, perfectly placed. And then there it is, the comet. Not blinding this time, just a faint white smear against deepening indigo. As if it knows it's not welcome, but came anyway. Like an awkward guest who still brought wine. You stare at it for a long time, wondering who else centuries ago stared and wondered. Did they see the same silence, the same elegant rejection? Were they just as curious or terrified? Behind you, a voice whispers, "Don't follow it." You turn. It's Yax, holding a small bowl of incense face paler than usual. Why not? Because some paths don't loop back. Some paths take you out of the pattern. He places the incense on the stone beside you, lets it smoke, and leaves without another word. The comet fades. By the time the moon rises and the stars take their proper places again, everything returns to normal, or at least pretends to. But you can't stop thinking about the priest's voice. What if the message is everything you believe is wrong? And what if just maybe the Maya already heard that message once and decided it was better never to hear it again? You lie back, the stone still warm beneath your shoulder blades, the incense smoke curling toward the sky. Above you, the heavens spin, perfect, predictable, glorious. Except for one rebellious streak that refuses to play by the rules. And somehow, that's the one thing you can't forget. The next morning, you wake up wondering if anyone has ever been smothered by a blanket made entirely of humidity. You peel yourself off the woven mat, half-cooked, and blink at the light filtering in through the thatched walls. The sky is already alive with birds arguing about who owns which tree. And somewhere off in the distance, drums thump in slow measured beats, like the city's heartbeat just waking up. You're supposed to help carry food offerings to the temple today, but instead your feet wander somewhere else entirely to the scribe's quarters, a shaded cluster of low buildings where the air smells like wet bark ink and mild panic. It's quieter here, the kind of quiet that tells you people are doing very important things and would prefer not to be interrupted. So, of course you interrupt them. You duck into one of the smaller rooms where an apprentice barely older than you is hunched over a wide strip of amotto, the smooth, flexible bark paper they use for writing. His name is Pakal, not that Pakal, the famous king from Palenque. This Pakal is short, sweaty, and currently glaring at a spilled ink blot like it just insulted his entire bloodline. You kneel beside him and pretend to admire the geometry, which is kind of easy because the glyphs are gorgeous. Each one is like a mini puzzle part, art part, calendar part, warning label written by someone who thinks in riddles. He's copying over a lunar table every mark, measured and double-checked. Looks like the moon's having a complicated week, you joke. Pakal snorts. It's always complicated when Venus is involved. You raise an eyebrow. You believe that too? Of course he shrugs. The gods don't play dice. Venus causes droughts, war, bad corn. Everyone knows that. You lean closer, pointing at a blank space near the corner. So, where would a comet go? He freezes, slowly turns his head toward you like you just asked where they keep the cursed scrolls. Nowhere, he says. You don't draw them. But why? He wipes his ink-stained fingers on his robe. Because to draw them is to acknowledge them, and to acknowledge them is to invite them. That's what Master Balaam says. You blink. Isn't that superstitious? I mean, you guys have tables for Venus phases down to the day. Wouldn't it be helpful to know when a comet might show up? He leans back, rubbing his temples. Helpful to who? The scribes, the farmers, the kings who already think a falling star means their rival cast a death spell. You grin. Sounds dramatic. Oh, it is, he mutters. Last year in Uxmal, a novice scribe added a small comet glyph to a ritual calendar as a joke. The priest found it, burned the whole page, sent him to copy maize inventories for 3 moons. That's cruel. That's maize, he says deadpan. You get up and wander around the room. The walls are covered in half-finished codices with symbols representing days, gods, animals, and directions. Every page has a rhythm, a math. Everything fits like puzzle pieces made by a divine accountant, except you spot one page turned upside down on a separate bench. Naturally, you flip it, and there it is. A comet, tiny, etched in dark ink. Not quite detailed, more like a whisper of a tail sweeping behind a round core. Beside it, a single glyph scratched over. The fibers torn, the paper bruised. Pakal snatches it from your hands like you just pulled his soul out through his nose. Where did you get that? He hisses. It was right there. He holds it like it's burning his fingers. That's not supposed to exist. Why did you draw it? I didn't, he blurts, then adds quieter. Not exactly. You give him the look. Though we both know you're lying, but I'm not mad, just curious. Look. Works every time. He sighs. It came in a dream. Big. Screaming. Tail like fire. It flew over the cornfields and made the river boil. I woke up with the shape in my mind. And you drew it. Only once, he says, staring at the paper. Then I scratched it out. But the dream hasn't stopped. Now you're the one who's quiet. The kind of quiet reserved for the part in the movie where someone's about to say, I think we made a mistake. You sit back down beside him. Do you think the gods don't want us to see comets? Pakal hesitates. I think they don't want us to measure them, like trying to teach a jaguar how to read. It won't make the jungle safer, just makes you tastier. Well, that's a fun mental image. That night, you can't sleep. Your mind keeps returning to that scratched-out comet, to the priest's jade mask, to the whispered warnings, and the half-jokes about sky serpents. You lie under a thatched roof, staring at the same stars that once guided entire civilizations, and wonder what else they're hiding. Eventually, you give up on sleep and walk outside barefoot on cool stone. The sky is clear, painfully vast, humming with distant light. You spot the usual suspects, Orion, the Pleiades, Venus, throwing side-eye at the moon. And then you see it again, the comet. Not large, not flashy, just a subtle smear of light near the horizon, like a secret slipping out before it was ready. You whisper its shape to yourself, trying to trace it in your memory. Not draw it, just remember, like Pakal. And for a moment, you feel something shift, not outside, but inside, as if the air around you thickens slightly, as if something very, very old has taken notice. You turn around slowly. No one's there. But you suddenly understand something that no priest or scribe had to say out loud. Some things are left out of the books, because writing them down means they're part of your story now. And not all stories want to be remembered. By the time the next sun crawls over the treetops, you're beginning to understand that in this world, silence is not ignorance, it's strategy. You wake to the sounds of chattering birds, wooden ladles clacking against clay, and the unmistakable rhythm of ceremonial drums being rehearsed by someone with no sense of timing. But today's not just any day. It's the reappearance of Venus, the planet that doesn't just shine, it struts. You're ushered toward the edge of the Royal Plaza, where preparations are already underway. Bright banners flap from the temple steps, embroidered with jaguar serpents, and what you think is either a star or an extremely smug flower. Scribes set up elaborate contraptions, gnomon poles, sighting stones, and carefully spaced cord lines to measure the horizon with painful precision. One wrong angle and boom, someone gets blamed for early monsoons. The priests are practically vibrating with anticipation. Everyone's dressed to the nines, or well to the nines, 100 gold chest plates, obsidian jewelry feathered cloaks that probably weigh more than a guilt trip from your grandma. And above it all, in the deepening twilight, Venus emerges, sharp, piercing, perfectly on time. The crowd exhales, like they've been holding their breath since last week. You glance around. The people murmur prayers. The children scatter petals. You, meanwhile, look west, and there it is, the comet, faint, unobtrusive like a rebellious guest, standing just outside the party smoking something suspicious. No one mentions it. All eyes stay locked on Venus, the diva of the sky. That planet gets poems, statues, entire sections of the codices. She's the celestial Beyoncé of Mesoamerica. The comet, it's the weird cousin who shows up uninvited and eats all the maize cakes. A priest nearby begins the ritual chant. He speaks of Venus's return as a sign of victory of balance, restored of blessings upon crops and kings. Behind him, acolytes sprinkle cacao shells into the fire pit, the smoke curling like question marks into the dark. You're so focused on the comet that you barely notice a woman stepping up beside you. Her robe is simple, her hair pulled back in a tight braid, no jewelry, no fanfare. She doesn't look like a priest or a scribe, just someone who sees too much. "You're looking in the wrong direction," she says without turning. You blink. "You mean Venus?" "I mean them." She nods toward the comet. "That's not what this is about." You glance at her. "What is it about then?" She finally turns to meet your gaze. Her eyes are the color of burned cinnamon warm, tired, maybe older than the ruins themselves. "It's not that comets have no meaning," she whispers. "It's that their meaning isn't safe." That line sinks into your chest like a heavy stone. You try to ask more, but she's already disappearing into the crowd, slipping between dancers and musicians like a shadow that never belonged there in the first place. You watch the ceremony unfold. A noble kneels for a blessing. A jaguar dancer performs tight circles around a stone calendar. Children toss petals into the air and giggle as they land like confetti. The comet lingers in the sky. You wonder how many other ceremonies it has watched quietly, uninvited, unnamed. How many times it has brushed against the edge of prophecy, only to be ignored by those too afraid to measure it. Later, over a bowl of steaming pozole, you sit with a few apprentices. One of them, Ixchel, not the goddess, just coincidentally named, brings up the ceremony. "Did you see the way Venus lined up perfectly with the North Temple arch?" She beams. You nod. "Yeah." And the comet was right beside it. Everyone falls silent. You immediately regret saying it. Ixchel swallows hard. "Why would you say that?" "I just noticed." Another apprentice, Chak, looks down at his food. "It's not meant to be seen," he mumbles. "That doesn't make sense," you say. "How can something in the sky be not meant to be seen?" Pakal joins in from across the fire, because seeing is the first step to knowing, and knowing means responsibility, and responsibility gets people killed. He says it so casually, like he's talking about laundry. The fire crackles between you all. The sky above fades deeper into ink, the stars prickling into place like reluctant confessions. You finish your food in silence, trying not to glance upward, but your mind won't let go. You think of how meticulously the Maya charted Venus, the hundreds of years of observations recorded on folded paper, the wars declared based on her movements, the crops planted, the kings crowned, the temples aligned, and yet they ignored the comet, not because it wasn't real, but because it refused to follow the script. Later, unable to sleep, you wander the outskirts of the city beyond the last row of houses where frogs sing dirges and fireflies blink like confused gods. You climb a low hill and lie back, hands behind your head, the grass damp and itchy, but not enough to matter. Above you, order. The sky is a giant calendar. Stars move like dancers in a pattern older than language. The constellations are exactly where they're supposed to be. And there again, off to the west. The comet. This time it's brighter, bolder. A streak of light that cuts across the heavens like it knows it's being ignored and doesn't care. It pulses not just with fire, but with rebellion. You sit up. Maybe that's why they ignore it. Because comets don't play by the rules. Because Venus says I am here on schedule. Trust me. And the comet says I wasn't supposed to be here. Deal with it. You lie back down the grass, hugging your shoulders, the sky pressing down like a quilt stitched with stars. And for the first time, you realize the Maya weren't blind to comets. They chose blindness because even the most brilliant civilization sometimes looks away from what it fears it can't control. And somewhere deep inside you, something stirs. Not fear, not rebellion, just wonder, the kind that won't let you sleep. The next day begins with thunder rumbling low in the distance like some enormous sky animal groaning in its sleep. You step out into thick mist that clings to your skin like second thoughts. The city moves more slowly this morning, vendors yawning as they arrange fruit temple guards leaning on spears like they're holding up the sky itself. Your thoughts are still tangled in last night's sky, the comet Venus, and the silence wrapped around them like a forbidden prayer. You wander aimlessly through the maze of stone streets until you reach the city's southern wall, where the stones are less polished, more lived in. Here, the murals are older, worn down by weather and time, and gossip, probably. You pause at one wall where the paint has held surprisingly well. There's a strange scene stretched across the surface. Not a royal procession or a god flinging lightning, but people hiding, crops wilting, a black streak across the sky, a star with a tail. You lean closer. It's not the art style of the court painters. It's rougher, looser. Someone painted this not to impress, but to confess. A woman nearby catches your gaze. Her arms are full of woven mats, and her eyes carry the tiredness of someone who survived more than one kind of famine. She watches you studying the mural and says, "Ka will kokshi." You try to repeat it. Fail magnificently. She chuckles. It means the sky bites. That's what my grandmother called it, the star with a tail. It came when the rains didn't, when children fell sick, when corn dried to ash. You glance back at the painting. So people did see it. "Oh, we saw it," she says, her voice soft. But seeing and believing are different things. That line lodges itself in your brain like a thorn. She sets down her mats and points to a figure in the mural, a man painted with bulging eyes, mouth open in a scream that spirals upward like smoke. That was the scribe. He painted what he saw. You nod slowly. And then she shrugs. Then the rains came back. The corn grew again. And people decided he must have been wrong. You stare at the man in the mural. His scream, forever caught in fading pigment, says otherwise. Later that day, you follow a group of children heading to the edge of the forest. They chatter about toads and berries and ghosts in the trees. You smile and trail behind, pretending not to be eavesdropping. At the forest edge, the group breaks apart, some chasing fireflies, others daring each other to climb halfway up trees before falling dramatically. You find yourself sitting on a rock near a bent old man weaving baskets from reeds. He hums a tune that sounds like a lullaby, and Thunderstorm had a baby. You nod a greeting. You're the one asking about the comet, he says, without looking up. You sigh. Is it that obvious? He grins. Everything is obvious to old ears. You watch his hands work, steady, wrinkled wise. Did you ever see one? Once he says, when I was a boy, it was bright, hung in the sky for days. The priests said nothing, but the dogs howled, the birds disappeared. My mother buried a bowl of cornmeal under the hearth to keep the spirits calm. Did anything happen? He stopped weaving, just for a second. My brother didn't come back from the hills. He went to gather fruit, never returned. You swallow hard. I'm sorry. The old man shrugs, but it's the kind of shrug that carries 50 years of weight. The sky doesn't answer to us, he says. We ask. It shrugs. You walk back to the city as the sun begins to drop, painting the clouds in bruised purples and orange. The comet has not returned, at least not visibly. But now you see its fingerprints everywhere. A temple built slightly off-angle from the rest, a carving defaced by a chisel that stopped just short of finishing, a scribe's hut with a scorched corner. These aren't accidents, they're erasures. That evening, a fire dance is held in the main plaza. Flames twist in hypnotic spirals as dancers wearing jaguar masks leap and roll their shadows, flickering like ghosts across the temple walls. Drums pound fast and furious, mimicking a heartbeat with anxiety issues. One dancer wears a black feathered cape and carries a long streak of cloth behind them. The crowd gasps, then hushes. You realize what it is: a comet, or at least a pretend one. The dancer spins wildly, then collapses in the center of the circle, motionless. Priests rush forward, covering the figure with a red cloth. The music stops. Someone murmurs, "It's just performance." But no one claps. You watch the people drift away, whispering to each other, side-eyeing the sky. There's no joy in this ritual, only a nervous relief that it's over. Later, you return to the observatory. The moon is high and sharp tonight, casting long shadows across the stone floor. You lie down in the center, arms stretched out, eyes wide open, and suddenly you wonder something new. What if the comet wasn't just an omen? What if it was measurable, trackable, had been all along? What if the Maya ignored it, not because it lacked a pattern, but because they found one they didn't like, one that spelled out catastrophe? You close your eyes. The air is still, and all you can hear is the sound of your own breath and the distant, almost imaginary hum of the stars above, spinning, spiraling, and maybe hiding something they hope you'll never fully understand. The days roll forward like a carved stone wheel, smooth, methodical, too heavy to stop. You spend the next morning helping prepare for a sun ceremony in Copan, a city so sacred even the trees seem to whisper in respectful tones. You've traveled here with a trade caravan ostensibly to carry dried peppers and obsidian blades, but really, you've come chasing the sky again. This time, it's the eclipse they're all buzzing about. You know the drill by now. The priests know the timing to the minute. People crowd the plaza staring up with slabs of polished jade held in front of their eyes. Children are warned not to blink too fast. Vendors sell eclipse-shaped maize cakes. Yes, that's a thing, and you're definitely not passing that up. But you're also watching for something else. Not the moon devouring the sun. Not the ceremonial fire meant to reignite it. You're watching the edges of the sky, the corners where things don't belong, the places where comets sometimes sneak in like uninvited guests at a divine rehearsal dinner. And wouldn't you know it, just as the shadow begins to creep across the sun's burning face, something flickers in the western sky. Faint, brief, but unmistakably comet-shaped. You glance around. Nothing. No reaction. Not from the high priest standing atop the temple stairs in full regalia. Not from the crowd who now gasps collectively as the world begins to dim. Not even from the parrot perched on a nobleman's shoulder who honestly seems like it has opinions about everything. The priests light their fires, chant their chants. The eclipse deepens, shadows sharpen like obsidian blades. The world shrinks into silence as if holding its breath. And the comet, it disappears. Just as the eclipse reaches totality, you're chilled not by cold, but by something you can't name. The kind of unease that crawls between your ribs and rearranges your thoughts. After the ceremony, as the sun returns and people rejoice like toddlers, seeing cake for the first time, you quietly approach one of the junior priests. He's young, eager, still sweating through his embroidered tunic, like he's not sure he's allowed to breathe. "Did you see the comet?" you ask casually, like asking about the weather. His face freezes. "No," he says quickly. Too quickly. You tilt your head. Not even a little one west of the sun. He looks around, lowers his voice. "We don't mention it. Not today. Especially not today." "Why not?" "Because eclipses are moments of balance," he whispers. "And comets are messengers of imbalance." "Ah, of course. Can't have oil and water dancing at the same party." He steps away before you can ask more, vanishing into the dispersing crowd like a magician who regrets taking the job. You wander the temple corridors after nightfall, drawn toward the older sections, the parts not lit by ceremonial fires, the places where even the bats hesitate to hang. You stumble upon a small chamber used by the scribes. The walls are covered in faded glyphs, mostly records of eclipse cycles, solar zeniths, and the important Venusian charts. And in the far corner, almost as an afterthought, there's a tiny scratched carving. Not a full glyph, more like a note someone didn't finish. A circle with a tail. Crude, rushed, deliberate. You run your fingers over it. Someone wanted it recorded, but not officially. Your breath catches. That night, lying on the rooftop of a half-collapsed storage building. Don't worry, the rats already claimed the good corners. You stare at the sky with the stubbornness of someone who refuses to be left out of the secret. And here's the secret you begin to piece together. The Maya weren't just ignoring comets out of superstition. No, this is selective silence, strategic omission. Because some eclipses match comet sightings. Not often, but when they do, the stories that follow aren't kind. You remember the woman at the mural wall, the sky bites. You remember the priest with the jade mask and the scribe who dreamed of rivers boiling. You remember the comet streaking beside Venus. The fear, the silence, the avoidance so complete it feels like a spell. You remember, too, that the Maya calendar is a wheel, not linear, not a straight line like a modern calendar. It cycles, loops, spins back on itself. What if the comet does follow a pattern, just not one that fits the wheel? What if it's a spiral, not a circle? You close your eyes and see it, a pattern just beyond reach. Too long for a lifetime, too vast for a codex. A whisper threaded between centuries. The priests knew. The scribes tried to write it down. And someone, many someones, decided it was better not to remember. But you do, now lying under a sky that looks peaceful only if you don't stare too hard. You remember everything. The comet, the eclipse, the moment the sky blinked and no one dared admit it. The air the next morning feels heavier, not hot, just dense, like it's filled with unsaid things. You wake slowly, tangled in sleep and sweat and a growing sense that you've wandered too far into something that doesn't want to be seen. Back in the city, You slip again toward the scribe's district, not the official halls this time, but the outer edge, near the storage quarters and spare glyph blocks. A place where ink stains the floor and no one bothers with robes. The scribes here are younger, messier, and slightly more likely to mutter things that could get them exiled or promoted, depending on the day. You find Pakal again. His eyes are red from lack of sleep, and he's chewing on a reed stick like it owes him money. I need to show you something he says before you can even say hello. He pulls out a folded parchment worn along the creases. It's not a codex page, it's a draft, the kind that's not meant to be seen. On it, 2 sets of symbols, one tracking a lunar cycle, the other a comet sighting. Side by side. They matched, he whispers. I compared them myself. You stare at the sheet. The comet symbols are rough, hand-sketched, unfinished, but clearly not accidental. Where did you get these? From a discarded packet in the bone room. It was wrapped around obsidian knives. Someone used it for padding. His laugh is short and hollow. That's what prophecy's worth these days. You hold the paper carefully like it might burst into flame. Have you shown anyone else? He shakes his head. No, I'm not suicidal. You look around. The room is quiet. The others too busy sharpening styluses or arguing about whether it's appropriate to draw a maze god with only one eye. You lean in. Why do you think they erased this? He sighs, pushing a hand through his hair. Because it fits too well. And you realize what he means. If comets can be predicted even occasionally, then they aren't just wild omens. They're warnings, trackable ones, useful ones. But that usefulness also makes them dangerous. Because a prophecy that comes true makes a priest look like a genius. But a disaster that comes true makes him look like he knew and did nothing. You step back, heart racing. Later that evening, you walk alone near the outer shrines, where old idols gather moss like gossip and spiders spin webs between long-forgotten gods. You duck under a stone arch and find yourself inside a cool, narrow corridor lit only by the glow of fireflies and regret. There you see another scribe, older, thin as a reed, bent over a page he immediately covers when he sees you. I'm not here to report you, you say quickly. He watches you for a long moment. Then slowly, he uncovers the page. It's covered in comet glyphs, dozens of them, all scratched out with thick black strokes. Only the faint impressions remain like bruises on bark. Why hide them, you whisper. He taps his stylus on the stone bench, because even recording them draws their attention. You raise an eyebrow. You think the comet is watching. He doesn't answer, just looks toward the door, then back to you. It's not about the stars, he says. It's about what follows. Your throat dries. Famine. He nods. Plague, war, madness. There are patterns, yes. But no one wants to believe that the sky might be actively cruel. You sit beside him, eyes on the wall. There are carvings here too, layers beneath layers, some half erased. One shows people covering their faces while something streaks above them. Another shows fields on fire. You whisper. So they erase the comet from the records, hoping to erase the disaster too. Wouldn't you, he murmurs. You don't answer. That night, you climb the temple steps alone. The city below glows faintly with cooking fires and flickering torches. The stars above are dazzling. And in the far western corner, almost shyly, The comet returns, longer this time, brighter. You sit, breathing slowly, the wind brushing against your cheeks like a warning or a lullaby. You watch it burn across the sky, bold and unapologetic. And you wonder, how many times has this happened? How many cities, how many kings, how many festivals celebrated under skies that held a secret no one dared name? And more importantly, how many scribes buried the truth in the shadows, hoping it would never crawl back out? You don't know yet what comes next, but you have a sinking feeling that it's coming anyway. The next morning, you wake to shouting, not angry shouting, more like urgent storytelling. The kind of shouting that says you won't believe what just happened, and also maybe run. You roll off your mat, slap the dust off your tunic, and follow the noise to the central courtyard where a crowd has gathered around a mural in progress. The colors are fresh dripping slightly in the morning sun. At first, it looks ordinary. A royal figure holding a serpent staff surrounded by the usual sunburst glyphs and maze gods. But then you spot it. Behind the figure, drawn smaller, shadowy, with a tail that splits into 3 streaks of comet. You blink. The artist is standing nearby, brushing their fingers off on their tunic like they're expecting someone to throw a coconut at their head. You push your way through the murmuring crowd. Did someone commission this? You ask too loudly. The painter looks at you like you just asked if the sun takes lunch breaks. Of course not. I added it last night. Felt right. And that's when the crowd gets real quiet, because no one, and I mean no one, adds a comet to a royal mural. That's like carving a thundercloud into a wedding cake. A priest appears, robes rustling like angry curtains, and stares at the wall. He doesn't yell, doesn't even frown. He just turns, walks away, and says to no one in particular, "Get the plaster ready." Within the hour, the mural is being scraped and repainted, the comet scrubbed into oblivion. You watch stunned as history is erased in real time again. A few children nearby whisper "sky serpent" and are immediately hushed. A merchant mutters that his maize spoiled this morning for no reason, and now you've got people blaming paint for breakfast. But behind the grumbling, something's shifting. People saw the comet. People talked about it. And for the first time, not everyone flinched. That afternoon, you're drawn to the far quarter of the city where stoneworkers gather. Among them is a woman named Chimal, broad-shouldered, soot-streaked, and far too tired to care what priests think. She greets you with a nod and a chunk of roasted pumpkin. "You're the one asking about hairy stars," she says, mouth full. "You heard. Please, half the city's waiting to see if you burst into flames." You sit beside her as she chips away at a block of limestone shaped vaguely like a serpent head. "Did you see it last night?" She grunts. "Hard to miss. Was following us from the edge of the sky like a bored jaguar." You look around. The workers don't stop chiseling, but they're listening. One of them snorts. "Priests say it's just gas." "Well, so is my uncle, and he doesn't cause droughts," Chimal replies. They laugh, but there's nervousness in it, a recognition. Because whether it's superstition, pattern, or something else, the comet keeps showing up. And every time it does, something changes, even if it's just how people whisper. You ask, "Why do you think the rulers don't talk about it?" Chimal wipes sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, because the sky's their best propaganda machine. They point to the sun and say, "See, I'm favored." They point to Venus and say, "See, war is coming, don't blame me." But a comet, it's chaos they can't spin. You nod. it won't be tamed. Exactly. It doesn't serve. It warns. That word lands heavy. Warns. That night, you find yourself at the edge of a cliff just outside the city. The stars pulsing overhead like a million tiny secrets. Beside you sits a traveling merchant you met a few days ago. He's seen cities rise and fall. He chews cacao beans like they owe him rent and carries a star map that's half science, half heresy. He pulls it out. Now rolled bark, painted with constellations, some familiar, others marked with strange curling lines. What are those, you ask, pointing to one that looks like a sideways dragon? Comets, he says casually. At least where I think they were. You tracked them. He shrugs. As best I could. One appeared the night the river rose too fast in Quirigua. Another during a rebellion in Yaxchilan. One right before the fire in Tikal. Coincidence. Maybe, he says. But enough of them, and it stops feeling like bad luck and starts feeling like a pattern. You run your fingers over the page. Why not share this? He snorts. You think the priests want a merchant telling them the sky's got opinions? They'd rather pretend it's just decorative. He leans closer, voice dropping. You know what I think? I think the comet comes just early enough to be a warning, but only for those who pay attention. That idea sits in your chest like a stone in your pocket, small but impossible to forget. And as the sky darkens deeper and the wind rises cool across your arms, the comet appears again. Just for a moment. No thunder, no flames, just light. A long, curved breath of light, like the sky whispering, pay attention. And for the first time, you're not the only one watching. Around you, others look up. Quietly. No screaming, no panic, just awareness. And maybe, just maybe, that's where change begins. The next morning starts with an eerie quiet. The birdsong has thinned. The air feels off, like the jungle itself is holding its breath. You pass a group of market women who've halted mid-conversation, baskets still on their hips, eyes lifted toward the horizon. You follow their gaze, half expecting smoke or soldiers. But there's nothing, just thick clouds rolling low and slow, the color of old bruises. And then you hear the drums. Not festive ones, not the kind that precede dances or maize offerings. These are slow, heavy, and entirely out of rhythm, like someone pounding on the earth's chest to wake it up. You follow the sound weaving through nervous crowds. The plaza is packed, but no one celebrating. At the center near the fire pit stands a circle of nobles and priests, serious, motionless hands clasped in prayer. Before them, a bloodletting altar, newly washed, still damp. You don't need to ask what happened here. The crimson stains beneath it whisper enough. The eclipse is still fresh in everyone's mind. And now, as if on cue, a meteor shower had swept across the pre-dawn sky. But not a beautiful one. The guards you passed whispered that the stars fell too fast, too many, like someone had dropped a basket of burning coals. People woke screaming, crops, birds scattered, dogs howled and refused to go near the temples. Now, the priests perform a hasty ritual. Smoke billows from a mix of copal and dried pepper. The dancers wear no feathers today, only plain cloth, and expressions like they've read tomorrow's headlines and want a refund. You push your way to the back of the crowd where Yak stands holding a small bundle of dried herbs to his chest like a shield. They say it's just sky vomit, he mumbles. What? The falling stars. One priest called it that. Sky vomiting. Said it wasn't an omen, just celestial indigestion. You blink. That's the official explanation, he shrugs. It's better than the gods are mad and your walls are made of lies, I guess. Nearby, a noble stumbles during the ritual. People gasp. One priest drops his torch. The fire sputters and dies. You feel it then, a collective unknowing. Like the people, the priests, the whole city is suddenly unsure where the edge of their world actually is. You hear a voice beside you. Its Pakal eyes darker than usual. You know they're not tracking anything anymore. You frown. What do you mean? He leans in. The scribes have stopped recording sky events. You stare. They say the calendars aren't lining up anymore. Too many overlaps. Too many deviations. A Venus cycle that came early. A moon phase that lasted too long. The comet. The eclipse. The falling stars. You look around. The stone faces of the temples no longer feel steady. They look confused, as if the gods carved into them are faking certainty. You spend the rest of the day moving like a ghost through the city. Everywhere you see signs of unease. A child refusing to eat. A woman burning dried corn at her doorstep just in case. A scribe scratching out an entire page with the back of a shell, muttering that the sky had stopped speaking in math. As dusk approaches, the city is unusually quiet. No flutes, no dancing. Even the bats seem late. You return to the merchant's hut, hoping he's still there. He is, and he's not alone. Several people sit in a circle, their voices hushed. Among them, Chimal, the stoneworker, yaks. 2 apprentices you vaguely remember from the observatory, and a stranger with a tattoo of a spiral comet on his neck. The kind of tattoo you get only if you've lost the will to be subtle. They're talking, really talking, about sightings, cycles, repeating signs. 3 cities, the merchant says, laying out another one of his bark maps. 3 cities saw a comet within 2 weeks of meteor showers. All had grain rot within a moon cycle. Then uprisings. Then plague. Someone scoffs. Coincidence? Sure, he says calmly. 3 times is coincidence. 4 is a habit. You feel everyone looking at each other the way people do when they realize they've been standing in the same storm, just on different roofs. You raise your hand slowly. What if the comet isn't the cause? Silence. You continue. What if it's not doing anything, just showing up when something's about to break? Pakal rubs his temples. So it's not an omen. It's a flag. Or a mirror, Chimal adds. The sky saying, look closer. Your balance is already gone. Someone at the back mutters, so what do we do? Tell the priests. We cracked the code. Laughter, bitter, dry. No, the merchant says. We don't warn them. We prepare. He points to the sky chart. Because if I'm right, this isn't the last sign. You walk home in the dark, stepping carefully around sleeping dogs and dropped fruit. The air smells like ash and endings. Overhead, the sky is full of stars. But tonight, you don't trust them. Because now you're no longer wondering if the comet is a message. You're wondering what it's warning you about next. And if the Maya knew all along, but decided for the sake of survival to pretend they didn't. You don't sleep that night. Not because you're afraid, okay, maybe a little, but because your brain has gone full scribe mode, racing in loops like a jaguar chasing its own tail. You keep seeing it, the comet, the falling stars, the eclipse, the silent scribes, the repainted murals. It's all beginning to feel like a story with a missing final page. And now that you've read the margins, you need to know how it ends. At dawn, you find yourself walking, not quite intentionally, toward the edge of the city, where the stone begins to give way to jungle. The forest breathes in long, slow exhales. Here, the vines don't care who you are. The ants have better organization than your entire childhood. And hidden among the trees, nestled in a ring of overgrown terraces, is a place yaks once whispered about a ruined observatory, not destroyed. Sealed, you spot the entrance quickly. It's not disguised, it's just ignored. Vines have crept over the doorway like they're trying to muffle it. The lintel stone still holds a faded glyph of the sun flanked by two snakes. Beneath it, a series of scratch marks, deliberate diagonal, as though someone was trying to warn without writing. You pause, listening. Nothing. Just bugs living their best lives, and a faint wind like a question in reverse. You duck inside. The chamber is wide and round, with a domed roof that has long since collapsed inward. Sunlight slants in through cracks, illuminating specks of dust that dance like tiny, confused spirits. You step lightly over broken pottery charcoal and a few bones animal. Hopefully, at the far end of the chamber, there's an altar, not the kind used for sacrifice. No blood grooves, no deity carvings. This one's flat, clean, with an obsidian mirror embedded in its center, cracked down the middle like a broken eye, and behind it, a wall covered in comet glyphs. Dozens, no hundreds, each one unique, each paired with a different symbol, some with grain, others with waves, others with stick figures mid-collapse. You scan quickly your heart, climbing your ribs. It's a timeline, a skylog. Many someones were tracking comets. Secretly, thoroughly, repeatedly. One glyph is dated beside a solar eclipse, another beside a fire glyph, and another beside the symbol for revolt. You stand there winded like you just ran up a pyramid barefoot in the rain. The air in the chamber grows heavier. And then out of nowhere, a voice behind you says, "You weren't supposed to find this." You spin. It's not a priest, not a guard. It's the woman from the Venus ceremony, the one with the cinnamon eyes and quiet warnings. She steps into the light, her robe now dusted with forest debris. "I hoped you would," she adds. You blink. "You knew this was here. I helped seal it," she says. "Years ago, when my teacher disappeared. Your brain backflips. Disappeared." She nods. "He was a stargazer, brilliant, obsessed with comets. Said they weren't signs, they were records. The sky's way of keeping receipts." You stare at the wall. "He made all of this." She hesitates. "He started it. Others added to it. Quietly, in secret. Whenever the patterns got too loud to ignore. You feel the cracked obsidian under your palm. Cold. Still humming with the ghost of reflection. Why was it shut down? She shrugs, but there's pain behind it. Too many patterns. Too much proof. It scared the priests. The idea that the gods weren't in control of the stars, that the stars were in control of them. She looks at you carefully, and now you've seen it too. You sit slowly against the far wall. What do I do with it? She doesn't answer at first, just watches the dust swirl in the slanting light. Finally she says, "The priests have stories. The scribes have cycles. But the sky keeps score. You've seen enough to ask the real question now." You nod slowly. "What is the comet counting down to?" She smiles, softly, sadly. "And what happens When it reaches 0, the wind picks up outside, brushing through the collapsed roof like a warning sigh. Leaves rustle like whispering teeth. You stand slowly. The woman walks past you, tracing a finger over one of the comet glyphs. They erased the past, she says, because they didn't want to face the future. And then she's gone. You linger in the chamber a moment longer. You press your forehead to the wall of glyphs, and you swear just for a moment the air behind you stirs not from breeze, but from something watching, not threatening, just waiting. You walk out into the jungle, blinking at the sudden sunlight, and above you, faint but visible, the comet returns. Same streak, same slow crawl, but now you see it differently. Not as an omen, not as a god, but as a record keeper. And whatever it's tallying, you have a feeling that number's getting very, very small. By now, the sky no longer feels like a backdrop. It feels like a character, one that has stopped whispering and started clearing its throat. You walk back into the city at dusk, barefoot, covered in dust from the sealed observatory, and half expecting someone to stop you, question you, drag you before a council of particularly fussy mathematicians. But no one does. Instead, you find Copan is holding its breath. The markets are closed early, the torches are lit too soon, and there's a kind of avoidance in the air, as if everyone feels a pressure but can't find the source. You hear snippets of talk as you pass. The fields look wrong. My daughter woke screaming again. Even the monkeys stopped throwing things today. You drift toward the temple terrace where astronomers usually gather at dusk to compare notes and argue about Venus like it owes them money. But tonight, they're not charting stars. They're burning parchment. You freeze in the shadow of a stone column and watch as stacks of bark pages are fed into a controlled fire, glowing red, then curling black, the ash spinning upward like confused snow. One of the scribes mutters, "It's better this way. If the cycles are off, they're worthless." Another adds, "Better to start fresh than read a sky that's lying." You feel something cold press against your ribs. Not fear, not exactly. Just the realization that even truth has an expiration date when it becomes inconvenient. You find Pakal again near the edge of the plaza, sitting cross-legged with his face in his hands. His usual ink-stained fingers are clean, too clean. "They made us erase the Venus tables," he says quietly. "Said they weren't aligning anymore. Said we must have copied them wrong." You sit beside him. "Did you?" He looks up at you. His eyes are red, but his voice is clear. "No." The sky changed. You both sit in silence as the fire crackles across the plaza, devouring centuries of math. Then he leans in. "But I didn't burn everything." You follow him later that night to a small storeroom behind the northern shrine. Hidden under cracked pots and a decaying bird mask, he uncovers a scroll. It's smaller than the others, wrapped in soft cloth and sealed with beeswax. He unwraps it slowly, reverently. Inside, a series of comet dates paired not with glyphs, but events, uprisings, floods, eclipse miscalculations. One entry simply says, "Temple shadow failed to align." You feel a chill crawl up your spine. Pakal traces one date with his fingertip. This one matched the eclipse last month, and the comet you saw, and the meteor shower you had. He nods. "There's another date coming. 3 moons from now." You blink. You predicted it. I didn't. The pattern did. You stare at the scroll like it's hissing. Later, you meet with the merchant again. He's less joking now, more deliberate. His once smirking mouth is a straight line. He lays out his map and points to 3 cities: Copan, Calakmul, Palenque. All saw comet activity. In the last cycle, he says, all reported structural failures in their temples this year. You ever heard of a temple shifting? You shake your head. Now listen. He pauses, looks you in the eye. There's talk of sealing the main observatory in Palenque. They say it's giving conflicting results. You breathe out slowly. So instead of admitting the math broke, they'll just close the book. They already are, he says. But there's one place left. You lean in, a structure outside Calakmul, deep in the jungle. The Watcher's House, they call it. Not official, not royal. Just a handful of stargazers too stubborn to stop looking. And they're tracking the comet. Not just the comet, he whispers. The voice in the timing. You shiver. That night, you climb to the top of the temple. The stars are thick above you, a ceiling of secrets. The comet is faint, but still visible, dragging its tail like a memory no one asked for. You remember the erased mural, the sealed observatory, the scratched glyphs, the scroll in Pakal's hands, and you begin to wonder, what if the Maya didn't ignore the comet? What if they listened so closely, so obsessively, that what they heard terrified them? What if the reason the comet was erased from the codices wasn't because it meant nothing, but because it meant too much? What if it wasn't a visitor, but a warning system, a pulse, a check-in, a silent count? You watch the tail flicker against the stars, and you start to think the sky isn't watching you at all. It's waiting for something, a return, a reckoning, a mistake made too many times. You wrap yourself tighter in your cloak as the wind picks up. It doesn't feel like wind. It feels like the breath before something speaks. The next morning, the wind still carries that feeling the way it moves through the trees, like it's searching for someone. You pack light, say almost nothing to anyone, and slip out with the merchant just after dawn. You're heading to Calakmul, more specifically, to the Watcher's House. The path through the jungle is narrow and overgrown, used only by hunters and people with questions no one wants answered. The merchant talks as he walks low and steady, like he's afraid the trees might repeat him. You learn that the Watchers were once part of the priesthood until they weren't. Too curious, too independent, too willing to ask what happens after the gods stop answering. You hike for hours, the sounds of civilization giving way to rustling leaves, unseen insects, and the occasional monkey judging your fashion choices from the canopy. By mid-afternoon, the trees part to reveal it a collapsed platform overrun with moss, half swallowed by the earth. At its center, built into the rock, stands a low circular tower, barely taller than a man, but unmistakably an observatory. The Watcher's House. You step inside. The chamber is dark but dry. A hole in the ceiling filters a single beam of light onto a flat circular stone etched with a wheel of dates and glyphs. But these are different from any you've seen. They aren't just symbols of Venus and moon cycles. They're overlays. A calendar within a calendar, layers built on top of one another, like someone kept realizing the sky was more complicated than it admitted. The merchant kneels beside the stone. Look here. This Mark III cycles ago, comet sighting. Here, solar eclipse. Here, temple collapse. And here, He points to a glyph that looks like an open eye beneath a streaking line. Comet and starfall. 1 week before the disappearance of the city of Ixgun. You frown. Disappearance. He nods. They didn't burn, didn't fall to war. They just emptied. No bodies, no stories, just silence. You kneel beside the stone heart, thudding in your chest like a warning drum. What do the watchers think is happening? He exhales. They think the sky is a recording device, not passive, not active, just recording. Long term, longer than we can measure. And every so often when the variables match, the comet returns. And when it does, he shrugs. Something resets. You both sit in silence as dust drifts lazily through the beam of sunlight. Then he unrolls a scroll more recent than any you've seen. It has a list of dates, past, present, and one circled 3 times in red ink, 17 nights from now. The merchant's voice drops low. That's when the comet reaches its exact previous position from the last recorded mass disappearance. You look at him sharply. Are the priests warning anyone? They won't, he says. They're busy resynchronizing their calendars, repainting murals, swapping truths for rituals. You stare at the glyph, the open eye, the streak, the hush around it. You whisper, what if it's not the comet that causes the collapse? What if it's the knowledge of it? He doesn't answer. That night, you sleep beside the old observatory wall. The stars above seem brighter here, less polished, as if they're telling you the truth whether you like it or not. And just after midnight, you see it again. The comet. Closer now. Longer. Its tail splits slightly like a snake's tongue. You watch it for hours. It doesn't blink. It doesn't move quickly. It just watches back. The next day, you hike back into the city scroll clutched in your robe. The merchant stays behind. I'll keep watching, he says, but you're the one they might listen to. You nod, though you're not so sure. Back in Copan, you find Pakal and Yaks waiting in the plaza. They've heard whispers. The sealed observatory has been opened again briefly by a scribe who wanted to cross-check a solstice prediction and found a crack in the sundial. Literal, physical, a break in the stone. The priest, overseeing the temple, ordered it repaired. Quietly, just erosion, he said. But erosion doesn't draw spirals in stone. Later that evening, you gather a small group in a back chamber of the scribe's quarters. Pakal, Yaks, the woman with the cinnamon eyes, Chimal, a few others. You lay out the scroll, the map, the comet glyphs. You trace the circled date, 17 nights. The room is quiet. Pakal leans in. What do we do? And this time, the silence doesn't feel like fear. It feels like choice. You look around. These people have drawn secrets, erased history, read the sky, and stood at the edge of forgetting. We prepare, you say, not for disaster, not for prophecy, for truth. The comet isn't a god. It's a mile marker, a cosmic checkpoint, and it's coming again. You have 17 nights. 17 nights. It sounds like a lot until the first slips away without warning. One sunset, one comet-filled sky, one whispered meeting, and suddenly you're down to 16. In the days that follow, the city begins to hum with tension. Not open panic, no one's throwing spears or stockpiling cacao beans, but there's a current running under everything. The priests chant longer. The markets close earlier. The birds stop nesting near the central temple like they've sensed something no prayer can chase off. You and Pakal spend your days copying, not rewriting the codices, those are too public, too sacred, but building a new one, a secret one. Pages of bark paper sewn together with fine cords stored in a pot beneath a false floor. Yax handles the calculations. He's the only one among you who can still smile while adding comet sighting intervals without weeping. The others prepare differently. Chimal forges obsidian blades, she doesn't say why, and you don't ask. The woman with the cinnamon eyes, her name you finally learn, is Ixnal, visits villages beyond the outer plaza. She carries no scrolls, only stories. Caution wrapped in myth. Truth coded as parable. Because if you tell people the comet is coming, they'll mock you. But if you remind them of the last time the maize went sour and the stars fell sideways, they'll listen quietly and start planting their fields farther uphill. You track the comet each night, from rooftops, from jungle clearings, from the top of the half-sealed observatory when no one's looking. You record its arc, its curvature, the faint shift in its brightness. And then, one evening, 12 nights out, it changes. It splits, not fully, not like a firework, but just enough. A thread of light drifts beside it, now slightly apart, as if something inside has cracked. Pakal stares at the sketch you make, pale as moonbark. That's never happened in our records, he says. Maybe the records were never complete, Ixnal adds. You lie awake that night, staring up. The stars blink overhead like they know something you don't. Maybe they do. You whisper, "What are you counting down to?" The comet doesn't answer. The next day, word spreads that a scribe in Tikal has gone missing. Not dead, vanished. His notes, too. All he'd been working on was a recalculation of the Venus cycle, which had suddenly stopped matching the calendar altogether. They'll say it was his math, Yax mutters, but we know better. The spiral glyph appears again, carved this time, not painted on the side of a merchant's cart. You don't know who placed it there, but you're beginning to see it more often. It spreads like a rumor carved into wood, silent, slow, insistent. 8 nights out, a tremor shakes the city. Small, short, but deep. The temple bells swing for a moment on their own, and no one rings them again that day. That evening, you and Pakal revisit the sealed chamber one last time. The comet glyph wall now feels like a conversation mid-sentence. You realize you've memorized the pattern without trying. Eclipse, revolt, flood, silence. Eclipse, revolt, flood, silence. One missing line remains blank. Pakal touches it. "This is us, isn't it?" You nod. And we don't know what comes next. But we will, he says, in 7 nights. 6 nights out, the city holds a sudden feast. No reason, no declared victory, just food, music, dances. A distraction so bright, it leaves shadows. But you notice something: the priests are eating more than usual, and their guards are armed. You, Ixnal and Yax, spend the night handing out scroll fragments disguised as story charms, not warning stories. Little songs about fire in the sky, riddles about serpents with split tails. Children repeat them the next day like games. You pretend not to see their mothers, listening hands still as stone. 4 nights out, the comet doubles in brightness. 3 nights it turns red. Not the whole thing, just a flicker at its core, like a coal buried in ash, waiting. Pakal tries to calculate velocity and burns a hole in the parchment. 2 nights. Ixnal gathers everyone beneath the Watcher's house. The original scroll is laid out. Everyone holds a peace. We don't know what will happen, she says. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. But if we're right, this story needs to be remembered. You all agree. The scroll is copied, sealed in clay, buried. 1 night remains. You spend it on the temple roof. The comet is no longer faint. It dominates the sky now. Huge, brilliant. Its tail trails across half the heavens, a banner of warning too bright to deny. No one in the city can ignore it now, and yet no one speaks of it. The priests chant louder. The scribes revise the ephemeris. The farmers salt their fields. A child cries in the plaza, and no one comforts them. Beside you, Pakal says, I think they always knew. You nod. They just hoped it wouldn't return. And now it has. 1 night left. Then the clock, whatever it is, strikes. You wake up with the taste of metal in your mouth and a silence pressing in from every direction. Not the usual morning hush. No distant flutes. No market chatter. Even the birds, those overachieving gossips of the treetops, have fallen still. It's the final night. You dress slowly. The city feels strange beneath your feet, like the stones have forgotten how to hold weight. Pakal meets you at the edge of the plaza. His eyes are sunken, but clear. He hands you a folded note pressed into a tiny carved shell. In case, he says. You don't ask in case of what. You just tuck it into your satchel beside the scroll copy, your last charcoal sketch of the comet's split tail, and a dried maize charm from a child who didn't know why you looked so tired, only that you needed something lucky. The others gather one by one. Ixnal Chimalyaks, the merchant who returned at dusk with a fresh ink pot and a look like he'd finally stopped running. You meet under the Watcher's house, where the air seems to buzz from the stone itself. Above, the comet blazes. It's not a streak anymore. It's a presence. Massive, pulsing, as if a god stretched its fingers across the sky and left a trail of burning light. The stars around it dim. Even the moon hangs back. You try to speak, but the words are brittle. Everyone watches, silent breath, slow. And then something shifts. Not the sky, the city. You feel it beneath your feet, a pressure deep and rhythmic, like the earth just remembered its heartbeat. Pakal gasps and points upward. The tail splits again. Once, twice. It fragments into 3 forks each, curling slightly in opposite directions. Ixnal whispers, That's not a comet anymore. It isn't. It's something else. A signal. The air grows thick and warm, like holding your face too close to fire. Somewhere in the plaza, a torch topples and no one picks it up. Priests emerge from temples' eyes, wide robes trailing behind them like banners in retreat. And then, without warning, the wind stops completely. The flame freezes mid-flicker. Banners go still. Your own breath sounds too loud in your ears. The comet pulses. Once, the temples hum. Faintly, a tone rises from the observatory, too low for music, too smooth for a chant. Yax grabs your arm. It's like a timekeeper. He breathes like a bell. The tone rises again, louder, clearer. And then you realize it's not just one tone. It's a countdown. The glyphs, the scrolls, the patterns. They weren't warnings of disaster. They were intervals, markers between something old and something inevitable. The sky blinks, and then darkness. total. But not like night. This is deeper. A blackness without stars, without air, without edges. You reach for pakal, for ixnal, for anyone, and find only absence. No sound, no body, no time. You float not up, not down, just elsewhere. And in that space, you feel it. Not a presence, but a memory of one. Something vast and old and patient. A thing that has seen cities bloom and fall calendars fail, scrolls burn. It knows your name, not the one you use, but the one the sky whispered when you were born. It isn't cruel, but it is indifferent, and that might be worse. It speaks, but not in language, just understanding. You reached the end of your cycle. Now begins another. Not all who remember will return. And then, light, blinding, heat and sound, and the smell of earth cracking open. You gasp, lungs burning, and find yourself on the temple steps, coughing, shaking alive. The city is lit with pale gold light, quiet, still, unbroken, but changed. Pakal lies beside you, blinking slowly. Ixnal is seated, hands pressed to the stone, like she's grounding herself in reality. Yax stares upward, eyes wide, whispering something over and over. We're still here. We're still here. You rise slowly, look around. No fires, no crumbled temples, no thunder. And yet, everything is different. The comet is gone, not faded. Gone, as if it never existed at all. The sky is quiet again. But something has been rewritten. You don't know what, not yet. But you can feel it in the stone, in your bones, in the pause before the wind returns, in the way the glyphs on your scroll now glow faintly in the dark. The countdown reached 0, and still you remain. You exhale. And for the first time in what feels like centuries, the sky exhales with you. The city moves slowly in the days that follow. People speak in hushed tones. No one mentions the comet, though every eye flickers upward when the sun dips. The priests offer new chants. The scribes begin tentative new calendars. And deep below the watcher's house, your scroll remains sealed, waiting. You walk the streets differently now, with reverence, with knowledge. You remember what the sky showed you, not fear, but pattern, not prophecy, but memory. You visit the old mural wall once repainted, now faded again. A child has drawn a crude comet in charcoal near the corner hidden behind a cracked flower. You smile and don't erase it. And when night falls, you climb once more to the observatory's roof. The stars blink quietly, not revealing, not hiding. Just being. And you realize it wasn't about the comet. It was about what you saw in its light. A world unafraid to forget, but still brave enough to remember. Now dim your own lights if they're still on. Pull the blanket over your shoulders. Breathe slowly. You're here. The sky is quiet. The story has settled. You've walked beside the ancient stars. You've heard what wasn't meant to be heard. And you've come back with your name still intact. Let that be enough. Let sleep take you gently like a boat gliding over still water. Let dreams carry you where even comets dare not go. Good night.